Good afternoon. I think last time we talked about the final temple being a window in time, and I envisioned it roughly between February 1st and April 30th, or more specifically in the 40 days between March 20th and April 30th. And do you remember where it said God rested on the seventh day? Well, the seventh day, the seventh star is here, and God is going to take a very brief nap while his archangels tear up the place. And then somebody on the council gets to remake the whole thing. If last time humanity's big sins were trying out a taboo food and building a presumptuous tower, well, this time it will be for abortions, gene splicing, and nuclear weapons. The only thing missing on the scarab for a Messiah Hierophant's name is the eye. The double crosses are for Orion and Saturn to switch sides. This is in Paracas, where they found the conehead skulls. Peruvians call it the candelabro for obvious reasons. I'm thinking they were trying to tell us something. You can see the top of Aquarius upside down at the base. You can see the lights are brightest in the east. There's a great cross in Leo looking suspiciously like a bird. And the lion's paw rises over Heart of Heaven by the time we reach the end, which would be fine in theory, except that the eagle points south and it's in the southern hemisphere. So I ask you, wouldn't that mean that the world is upside down from where it used to be? Ancient Peruvians carved that image 2 feet into the rock and 595 feet tall, so we might get a clue that the world eventually goes back the way it was. I got to thinking about that wheel of Nostradamus. Like the Sumerians, his eight-spoked wheel of Dharma seems to belong to both Saturn and Venus. So if we assume, like the Shamash tablet, we have a first of Aries event at the cusp of a new house, that means we now have four houses of the zodiac to cover in 3 moons. Anyway, I went back and started with the Saturn Venus moon of 28 March. We know Passover, Easter, and Ramadan have to do with a full moon. So full moon to full moon, the seer's window was at a minimum March 18th to May 26th, or perhaps their entire domain of March 1st to May 31st. Either way, it's pretty stinking quick. With the end of April looking on the mosaic very much like a conception, doesn't that beg the question, where would that put us 9 months later, give or take a reversal? And the answer is the cusp of Scorpio Sagittarius, where we said galactic center would light up the Scorpio Orion beam, probably along with the heliosphere running along the perpendicular axis. Hopefully, our reversal doesn't place us there immediately at the equinox. Can you imagine disaster dropping us off at the gates of winter? Game of Thrones. Winter would be coming even before the Ice Age. Notice that the goddess is the one wearing 7 diadems in her tiara, strangely similar to the SAR schedule of Mesopotamia. And she's in a coach drawn by 4 oxen or rams. If you look at her skirt, it seems to depict the stars of creation near Orion and Sirius, or perhaps the arrival of her Sabiti that we have yet to notice. We're expecting very soon an overambitious showboat of a guy, a jealous god, if you will. On the left, you have a Delphic tripod, more or less how it looked before Mehmed II chopped off the heads to say Constantinople was his in 1453. You can see 3 stars of creation on top, and the trigon of the Sun, Saturn, and Jupiter snakes had apparently gone around 28 times before the column had been erected at Delphi, commemorating the defeat of the Persians, and the time elapsed since Apollo slayed the python and claimed the temple of prophecy. The pillar went up in 479 BC from the melted weapons of defeated Persians. So 1,680 years, or 28 turns of 60 earlier, must have been 2159 BC. That year, the Chinese reported a special invisible eclipse, such as the one we're supposed to see around April 30th. The demon gods that time called Ho and He, though the names were listed as the two astronomers slain for not producing a known event. The story, I think, was to convey a mark at the 1/6 precession of the Star of Solomon. If we had written it down, would we have prepared this time? I don't think so. The Bible talks a bit about America in Deuteronomy 9, if you're interested. The Lord thy God hath cast them out from before thee, saying, For my righteousness the Lord hath brought me in to possess the land, but for the wickedness of these nations the Lord doth drive them out from before thee, not for thy righteousness or for the uprightness of thine heart dost thou go to possess their land, but for the wickedness of these nations the Lord thy God doth drive them out before thee, and that he may perform the word which the Lord sware unto thy fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Next month, one of the Yahwehs, is supposed to say the word, causing a hot darkness before we receive the great light. And then we'll see. If you break down the word Apollo, what do you get? El, Abel, Osiris, the son to die before Seth, one to live anew in the likeness of God and Adam. It's another Seth and Horus story. Death, the story of the eyes, and resurrection. The chant for Apollo was Yapen, which is interesting since some believe the name Pan relates etymologically to this pen or paean, which may have a Bible tie-in. When Jacob wrestled the angel of God in Genesis 32, he named the spot Peniel. He called the name of the place Face of El, for I have seen Elohim face to face. Paul again alludes to this time of the twins, or father and son, Saturn and Jupiter, when he says, For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. The symbols can be so vague and ambiguous. Because of that, on the other hand, they say so much. More on that in a second. The action for the second menorah, the second witness, happens at Nashira, the Arabic star sign for the helper, and it's also the subject of a Jewish song. Since the angel of God who is going to darken the skies is due before the God, or before his power, before the light, and both are due incredibly soon, I'm thinking a sign of the helper would be useful to finding these hidden ones. Gamma Capricorni, our last chance to decide. Would this also be the time when Venus and fiery Mars, or Inanna and Dumuzi, or Tammuz and Ishtar, or Yahweh and his Asherah are supposed to be hanging out and shining like Byzantium's original shield of the star and crescent? Or are the myths about this time with Phaeton, the junior sun king, just a children's story? The moons of Nostradamus will center close to an eclipse, the next one in Aries on April 30th. The concurrent Jupiter-Venus conjunction is supposed to bring Nibiru and Nemesis in line with us for the first time in about 6,000 years. If the sun runs the gauntlet between them before that, maybe that's when the Aquarian sun sports that tumor to the right, his sorting hat, or something making us remember our pointy-headed forebears. Can you believe we totally trashed the human genome in only 6,000 years? I feel like Homo sapiens was a guinea pig in a lab trial. Last time they were here, they did us a favor. They handicapped our DNA in Genesis 6:3 so we would live shorter lives as slaves, miners, ranchers, and farmers. They set our telomere limit to 120 years, which is a truly clever way to tell us the number of jubilees between creations. Also, a hint to know how long our countdown to apocalypse began. I'm not sure what to make of Moon 3. I believe by this point we will have emerged from devastation and it will be time for survivors to enter rescue recovery mode. Remember when our friend in Alaska said the darkness began the 1,260 day count in November 2018. By moon 3, it's over. The Anuna are due back, and we'll see if they took command over the planet's nukes before humanity messed up their cosmos and blew the stargates to hell. You might look up and see Leo still in charge. Remember where it says in Psalm 110:1, Yahweh told Adonai, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. Well, it will have happened. The world will have suffered a great deal of trauma, but we, Ephraim, will be starting over from scratch if we didn't get back in his good graces, especially with us. It's crowns or curtains. The Bible says the U.S. should not expect a great deal of sympathy at that point. Nahum 3:19 talks about us in a post-America world. Nothing can heal you. Your wound is fatal. All who hear the news about you clap their hands at your fall, for who has not felt your endless cruelty? For 200 years, we talked a great deal about exporting freedom, but more than anything else, what we exported was international debt and corrupt regimes betraying their own people. So who was working for Mammon? Just about everyone you know. So back to vague symbols saying lots of things. It's about where you focus. Here you have Orion and Aquarius, or Yahweh and his Yashira. You have a moon god below a sun god, which can be taken a couple of ways. Once the hidden ones come out of hiding and the UN stops spraying. As I've said a few times, this period we're in can come off looking like a war of the gods or a cosmic lovemaking session. And I wouldn't fault Asus Orion for getting mad at the goats, getting ideas. Remember how the Bible insists on there being two witnesses or some sort of confirmation of a thing, like there being two verses addressing the same issue? Well, just as there will be two menorah, February 28th and March 28th, before we get into real trouble, there will have been two words of God a dozen years apart leading up to our crisis. First one was due February 28th, 2010, and it showed up a day early. If we had known back in 2010 what was coming, do you think we might have done something, like moved out of the way? I doubt it. I think we would have looked at it fatalistically, as did my kids, saying, if it's our time, it's our time. And they pretty much highly disapprove of my wasting years and money thinking about two invisible objects with dire consequences. This was an interesting early picture of the hidden ones. It took the diffraction and reflection from a window on a fence to show us this age of Pisces is just about over. I bought an IR filter, but R72 was way too dark. Next, I'll try a piece of black obsidian as a scrying mirror, or maybe an ND8 filter, and see if that helps. Whatever the case, I don't see anything as clearly as Quetzal, Agostino, Joseph 1964, or Airy 55. Lots of people are catching what's up in the sky. I would encourage you to look around and find meaning in it. And if you feel like sharing pictures, well, we're here. The head of this Taino raven or heron or eagle connects on the other side of the five striped band. The back of his head shows a triangle for Aries and an E. And the E, fifth letter of the alphabet, could mean this celestial body is the one marking the Ahau. So let me tell you why that's a little confusing. At Göbekli Tepe, 8,000 miles away, I see 7 herons, which would mean that the heron is also the god of the Shar. It could also be telling us to beware the seventh Sar is the fifth Ahau is the fourth ram is the time for beam me up God. For more specifically, it's telling us to expect all the mess at our time of the praying hands, which is the coming conjunction of the blue star and red star around the end of April, or at least that's my terrible conclusion. Meanwhile, the lion's about to get lit up at the mouth of the sun, and that won't be any good for us. The Inuit snow knife also shows 7 bands on the neck of the loon, And at the other end of the bone, it shows the eyes of a serpent, meaning I think that these two visitors and their associates in tandem are the causes of ekpyrosis, flood, exodus, and a good number of great quakes with supervolcanoes. When we see what Khan, the chupacabra, is doing in the heavens, it will be confusing since we will see it from both sides of Earth's roll. Picture a reversal horizontally right to left, then vertically. Some of the ancients described it as an S, some squished it into a one-sided view of a spiral doubling back on itself. Others carved it as a heron's head on one side of a stone wrapped with a snake on the other side. I suspect by the varied interpretations that making sense of the star's movements from our rolling in two directions perspective will be difficult. So you remember how Red Horn of Picture Cave in Missouri was tied to Aquarius, Orion, and Sirius? This one shared eye hole version of a five-faced god is a foot long, weighs a dozen pounds, and here are some different angles on him that might be explanatory or confusing, but engage your right hemisphere brain for a second. Left shows him as Monoceros, the unicorn at Orion, where synagogue floors showed him blasting us from on high in 4415 BC. Abraham, the patriarch's city, meant fire. Agni, name of the first god in the Rig Veda, meant fire. The sign above Jesus' head meant Igne natura renovatur integra. In fire, nature is reborn whole. Fire is the unwritten beginning in the apocalypse that leads to Genesis, and it's coming here. The one on top right shows him as the eagle on high by vernal equinox. The one below shows him as Sirius the dog star. He's looking back in a 45-degree angle at the new first point of Aries. The remaining side is carved like a mastodon tooth, so we know people thousands of years ago made this thing, and that to them, Redhorn was a mastodon. I'll say it again. Your ancestors wanted so much for you to understand what's coming. Once again, Hollywood points the way. The butterfly section of the dress is what the ancients would have drawn as a knot of Tiet or a girdle of Isis. When red star and blue star meet near the vernal equinox, our confusion increases, trying to follow what's going on. But briefly, I think it will be eagle on top and lion below. Notice the dark one gets the nod for being heart of heaven on the dress. The Kneph image top center alludes to a vernal equinox creation. The little gold amulet below it shows Aquarius no longer in charge. No more hands raised in praise. She has been humbled. Religiously speaking, Babylon and Egypt are fallen. It will be a time for orthodoxy. I'll be slain for having given time to idolatry. Same sin as Canaan. Before he saw his grandpa naked, he had understood the nakedness of Noah's religion. He had read the Kudurru stones of Mesopotamia and they made sense. For that, he was cursed. It won't be a civil war, but until the mayhem involves ballistic missiles, it could easily be made to look like one. I'm afraid this guy is right. They can do this now by so many ingenious methods, and they can easily acquire their intel from Facebook, Google, Amazon, anyone in the computer business. Price of tech business in America is handing over your data. I guess if we talked about what sort of executive decision could lead to such a star chamber procedure, we would run into classified. So let's not do that. Keep an eye to your holy book as you read the headlines. And once you realize we have reached the time of the apocalypse, the text reads a lot clearer. Remember that picture of the three stars provided by the Nemesis group that showed the sole reason we've been suffering global warming in recent years? It had zero to do with your using a car or a barbecue. It was a conjunction of three suns and a few planets congregating at a Birkeland current. The worst of it is that carbon in the atmosphere will beget more carbon in the atmosphere, more greenhouse effects, more heat, more gases released from the tundra, more fires among the incoming plasmas. So we will briefly have a runaway Earth until she hits her new equilibrium, at which point we're headed to ice age in 20 years. Our seas will rise 131 feet, and just a whole lot of city populations around the planet will be looking for high ground. For example, Sacramento, where a lot of my family still lives, is at 90 feet above sea level. So those relatives will be making a trek to visit some of the rest of us. Can you imagine having to go camping permanently from a solar EMP taking out the grid for years? Damn difficult. Instant mayhem as far as folks can drive. All the maneuvering of the great leaders is going to amount to kabuki theater. It won't change the goal, which is to shake up the world. Just a massive amount of chaos before they implement the New World Order. Then it will be like the first days of the Soviets and Mao's boys, or the terror of Paris, genocide by another name. You think politicians are nice people? They're the pawns of powers and principalities that run this place. This was a kindergarten blasted in Ukraine. I don't know how much worse this place can get, but we're about to find out. Here's an old star map from Agostino's crew. I really can't talk to it, especially the labeling, but you may find it useful in figuring out what is about to take place. I believe last time Catfish and the gang were chiding me on thinking Nibiru Marduk, the son of Enki, would be the first to darken our path. My thinking was that Lucifer has to be thrown down and then rise up as the brightest thing out there, but perhaps it's Heart of Heaven, flipping our poles that does the entire show. All I know is you can't have one without the other. Raven and snake are like yin and yang, or vice versa. It's the dance that is important. Well, I apologize for always harping on the same stuff. One day it might all make sense, in which case you've a doctor to visit. Or as people sometimes point out, the clock runs out and either we survived the ash heap of history or we didn't. For now, we track shadows and lights, waiting to see where they lead. Shema bless you and keep you, now and forever.